On today's show, musician David Pearson and visual artists Luiza Kaminska and Kris Popiolek. Join me as we learn more about these hidden gems of London.
In the forest city, London, London, oh, in the forest city, London, London, oh.
Welcome to London's Hidden Talent. I'm your host, Jennifer Martino. In London, Ontario, our art and culture scene is thriving thanks to the creative talents of lifelong Londoners and people from around the world who have made this community their home. Together, we will get to know the people who are bringing our stages, galleries, and streets to life. First up, we have musician David Pearson. Dave is known for combining percussive effects, harmonics, and two-handed tapping, playing fingerstyle and slide on vintage six-string acoustic lap steel and harp guitars. Before moving to London, Dave lived in Philadelphia, performing at venues such as the Keswick Theatre and the Mann Music Center, where he shared stages with artists such as Tito Puente and the Moody Blues. Dave performs as a solo act and in the duo The Lost Philosophers with his wife, Jillian Barker. Dave, thank you for joining us today on London's Hidden Talent. I am really excited for Londoners to learn about you as a musician, but also to learn about some of the instruments that you play, because they are things that Londoners are likely to have never seen before, unless they've had the pleasure of seeing you perform live, or right now you're watching this episode.
Or one of the simple reflections, things at the museum or Covent Garden, wherever. But yes.
Yes. Yeah. And you play often with Simple Reflections for Artists, local collective of artists and musicians and dancers that play all throughout the year through different venues. And one of the instruments that you often feature at those performances is right here with us right now, the harp guitar, although usually I don't get to see the harp guitar that's over 100 years old because you bring a different version of it.
Yeah. I bring one that was made in 2012 with some pickups in it. And it sounds very good, and it's designed to be plugged in. It's a Chinese copy of this, which was made in 1917.
Wow. It's a piece of history. And how did you land on, out of all of the instruments in the world, land on playing the harp guitar, which most of us have never heard of, never mind played?
Back in the 80s, Michael Hedges wrote a piece for harp guitar called Because It's There. And they had it on a little acetate record inside of a Guitar Player magazine. It's one of these pieces of plastic. You pull it out, you put it on the turntable. Anybody remember those? And spin around and you listen, and it was this song, and it was a soundtrack to a particular Japanese movie, and about this guy climbing a mountain, and so he called it Because It's There. Wonderful piece. I won't play it for you now. Go find it on YouTube, look it up. It's great, absolutely great. I heard it. A whole bunch of people heard it, and they said, "What's that being played on?" And wasn't easy in the mid '80s to look. There was no internet to look things up, but you could find it. And pictures of this these instruments started surfacing. Before that, these were considered an evolutionary dead end as far as instruments went. You'd sometimes see them on pawn shop walls, the marlin on the wall, right? But no one ever considered actually playing them. But Hedges did, and they became very popular. They also became very expensive. When I first saw it, I said, wow, I got to get me one of these. And I saw how much they were going to cost. I said, wow, I'm never going to get me one of these. But eventually, decades later, I managed to get one. This one I actually found on eBay. So, yeah.
And how long have you had it?
I've had this one since 2016.
So almost 100 years. It was 99 years after this harp guitar was born.
It
became your baby.
Yes, it did. This was built by the Larson brothers in Chicago. They were two brothers who built high-end guitars for many companies. Always the higher end stuff. It was jobbed out to them, and this was jobbed out by the Dyer Music Publishing Company. At the time, a lot of music publishing companies had instruments and sold them, and this is one of theirs.
what is it that keeps you coming back to this particular instrument? Because you saw it, you thought it sounded interesting, you got your hands on one, but you've been playing it for 8 years now.
Yeah.
And what is it about it that keeps you coming back?
You have the wonderful range. Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful range of sounds.
So there are just things that you couldn't possibly do and sounds you couldn't make if you let this particular instrument.
Correct. If you didn't, the bass notes are really handy. Though I have found that it's very easy to play the bass notes too fast, and then everything all the sound kind of slurs together. So you have to be careful about stopping notes also to getting things together. Composing on it is interesting. It's great to take pieces that I already play and reworking them so they're better on the harp guitar. And then some pieces don't work out at all.
Is there much music that you can find to play, or do you have to compose much of the music yourself?
There's very little extant music from the time that these were written. First of all, there was no recording back then, or if there was, it was on like an Edison cylinder. So there just wasn't much to hear back then. And there was never much written because it would be difficult to write down the standard notation. And when people were initially playing this, it was originally done for volume. This whole extra thing was just to make it a louder instrument. The extra strings would vibrate to give you an extra richness, a harmonic richness. So most of this were just played on the top 6 strings, just like I play a 6 string, except or as I like to call it, the half guitar. And then everything would because these strings just rang so long, so it was difficult to do. But like I said, Michael Hedges did a lot of that stuff initially in the 80s, and then this is what we're doing now. There's a few players. There's actually the Dyer company they're in California. They've been resurrected as a going concern, and they make harp guitars and make standard instruments too. I don't think any company can survive just making harp guitars because people start playing that many, right? I do like the old ones, and like I said. Now keep in mind, I haven't personally played that many old ones, but.
And this isn't the only interesting instrument that you play. There's another instrument that I've seen you play that sits on your lap and is long and flat and is similar to a guitar in some ways. Can you tell us a little bit about that one?
Yeah, that was actually developed. So the arm on the guitar, that was developed by a guy named Kris Knudsen. He pronounced the K, and then was refined and manufactured by the Larson brothers. Kris Knudsen also developed a flat guitar. So it sat in your lap. The neck was all hollow, and guitar shaped, and there are lines on where the frets are. They're just suggestions, and you play with a steel bar. Was designed to play Hawaiian music. People also play blues and things on it now. That patent was eventually taken over. I'm not too sure about the legality, what actually happened there, by Herman Weisenborn. So these things are called generically Weisenborns, and there are actually some of the Weisenborn's original ones still around. They sound wonderful, but it was the same guy, same idea. The hollow arm was the big thing on it. They sound sweet. They're nice. There's other similar instruments like straight up guitars with a big nut and a big bridge that you play. They tend to be a little louder. They tend to be a little harsher. Ideal for some blues. But yeah, I've got a flat one. I've got this guy.
It sounds like you like a challenge, and you also like instruments that are rooted in history.
Yes.
And keeping something alive.
Yes.
Which is a really unique way to use music. And in the intro, we talked about how you used to live in Philadelphia, I'm so happy that you live in London now and you've been here for some time. You have been collaborating with other local artists. You've been playing, for example, at Simple Reflections for Artists shows with Kristen Renee and with some other folks. And, you know, we mentioned that you played with some really big, well-known names like Tito Puente. What has it been like for you coming to a place like London, which is obviously a much smaller and it must be a much different musical scene from a place like Philadelphia? And how have you found the integration into the local music community?
Okay. London and Canada in general has about 1/10 the population of the U.S. And I'm used to the population of the U.S. There's just more people. Cities are a bit more crowded. Things are a bit bigger, which has its upsides and its downsides. But it's harder to, I wouldn't say make a name for yourself, but it's harder to make a really good living here because there are fewer people. There you can have, it's easier to find a community. Now I can also say I was there for longer too. I've been here a pretty long time, but I was there longer also. So yeah. No.
So from the standpoint of living as a professional artist,
Yes.
very different in the States, and you're finding, especially in a mid-sized city for Canada, like London is.
Yes.
And you know, we've seen you be a big part of the local community when it comes to artists and musicians, and certainly you've become pretty well known by other musicians in the community. You also have quite a following, I believe, all the way from Japan.
Vietnam.
Vietnam? Okay, from Vietnam.
Yeah.
That's very interesting too.
That was an entire accident.
How did that happen?
I put up a couple of videos, and a couple of people from Vietnam thought this is really cool, and they went viral. Viral in Hanoi, yes.
That's so neat.
Ho Chi Minh City, yeah.
And I really enjoy watching your videos on Facebook, and there are lots of things that people can see there. And you also have a YouTube channel?
Yes.
And what is your channel?
Dave Pearson Guitar. YouTube, yeah.
And we can be thankful to the pandemic for at least one thing, and that is that it gave you a chance to record music. And I would encourage anybody to check out your YouTube channel so that they can see just how beautiful this instrument sounds. We're fortunate enough to have a video that you shared with us that we are going to play. And you know, if anybody has a chance to see you play live here in our community and you are out and about, especially through the Simple Reflections for Artists events, there is one that takes place in the winter at Museum London called the Spring Gala.
Yeah.
Well, I just said it takes place in the winter, but it's in February, right before spring starts.
It's cold.
It's cold. And I was right around Valentine's Day. And then in the summer at Covent Garden Market, you're there, but throughout the year as well. So people can look out for Simple Reflections for Artists to see where they are next. And if they're there, I know you're there. And then also they can learn more about you from your YouTube channel.
Yeah, the YouTube channel is great. Most of the stuff went up. It was a pandemic. I made it a goal, didn't always reach it, that at least once a week I was going to record something and put it on the channel. And then when you're recording something, anybody who's a musician knows, you go down this rabbit hole. This isn't perfect. This is whatever. What can I do here to try to get it exactly right? I said, okay, first off, I'm just going to do 2 takes, right? The first one, I'd always blow. The second one, out of the 2, I'd have to put 1 up. So I practiced these pieces almost exclusively all week until the time that I was going to record it, and some turned out really, really well, and some I'll probably want to do them over again at some point. But you know,
remind us one more time of the name of your YouTube channel.
Dave Pearson Guitar.
They can't forget that.
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking the time today, Dave, and for showing us this amazing instrument. And I look forward to seeing you perform live again soon.
Jennifer, thank you for having me.
Next, we have Polish-born visual artists Luiza Kaminska and Kris Popiolek. Luiza has shown her art at the Westland Gallery Square Foot Show, the London Public Library Art Show, the Western Fair Creative Arts Competition, and the Simple Reflections for Artists Forest City Fusion Art Exhibition at Tap Center for Creativity. Kris has shown his photography through the Western Fair Creative Arts Competition and the Museum London South America Photo Exhibition, where his photo was selected for a charity auction and photography magazine contest. Luiza and Kris, thank you so much for joining us on London's Hidden Talent today. I'm excited to get to know you more. I'm also excited for Londoners to learn more about you. Kris, you're a photographer, and Luiza, you're a visual artist, and we have some of your work right here on the set. Kris, maybe if you'd like to start, could you tell us a little bit about the style of photography that you do and the themes that interest you?
The style of photography, I like all of it, really. But really, my major ones are landscape, nature. I do architecture every now and then when we travel, but it's mostly nature. I like nature-made things versus man-made things.
And you must have traveled quite a bit for your photography because, for example, right here on the set, we have pictures of glaciers.
Yes, that's Alaska. Yeah, yeah. We are fortunate enough that we can travel a little bit. Of course, it's never enough, right? It would be nice if we could travel 50 weeks out of the year, but that's not realistic. Partly because we have a cat. and he would be lonely. Yeah. But yeah, we've been fortunate to be in a couple of times in Asia, in South America, in Europe, and obviously Canada and US. So it's nice to be able to photograph different things.
What's your favorite landscape scene that you've ever photographed, if you could pick one?
I think that would be one of those.
The glacier.
Yeah, the glacier. It's really cool. I mean, it's also cold, but it's really cool. So that would be as far as the nature, and as far as the nature as in animals, that would be India, Ramthampur Park, where we've not only photographed the tigers, we're close enough to them that we could hear them breathing.
Wow.
That was an experience that was really one of those once in a lifetime experiences.
Inspiring and maybe slightly terrifying?
Wasn't terrifying, even though the jeep, there was no windows between us and the tigers, but I guess they are more interested in different animals.
Antelope, maybe.
Yep.
And Luiza, your art is abstract. Interesting. The pieces that you chose today go really well together. We've got a lot of the same hues of the blues and the whites. And how did you land on this style of art?
So for me, the abstract is total freedom. So you're not controlled by doing any shapes or anything like that. You just have paint, you have color that you like, and just play with it. That's what I like about it.
Have you always enjoyed playing with colors and with art since you were little, or is it something that you came to later in life?
So for me, it was kind of hidden, the art. Usually I like just going to galleries and admiring other people. But during COVID time, I had a chance to just play in my house and have the whole floor spread. And I could just paint and pick any colors I wanted. And this is what I discovered. Yeah.
Have you kept it up since the pandemic?
So since I was doing more and more, and then there was a few shows where I could display it, and it kind of like the hidden dream that I had inside, I could show it to the world. Yeah. So in a way, yeah.
You kept going.
Yeah.
Nice. And the two of you don't always exhibit in the same shows. I saw your work together at the Simple Reflections for Artists Forest City Fusion art exhibition at the Tap Center for Creativity. Are there other instances where you found that your art overlaps, or do you generally work as solo artists and exhibit as solo?
Funny enough, I guess sometimes it's solo, sometimes it's both of us showing at the same time. And interestingly enough, and that was in a way funny coincidence, or I don't know, universe aligned the way it does. So at the top center with the simple reflections, Luiza's art was across the room from my art, which was very interesting. And later in that year, we had a show at the Forest City Gallery. And it was the same thing, where all art was across the room from each other. But there are some instances where it would be either Luiza or myself showing one at a time.
And one of those was a photography competition?
So the photography competition, so I entered my art into Western Fair visual art, but there was two photography competition where my name was recognized. One of them was through an online forum which doesn't exist anymore, sadly. It was a picture of Canadian tree, a tree in Canada of any sort. So I was fortunate enough to have one with nice red hues, and it was picked up and it was sold at a silent auction for Ducks Unlimited.
Wow.
So that was very nice. The other competition that I was recognized for was way back when I was living in Poland. There was a call for entries from one of the photo magazines. I went out with the camera, took some pictures, developed them, and picked two, and one of them was liked by the jurors.
And the South American.
So the South American one, it was done by somebody from London. I can't remember who did it and exactly when it was happening. It was after our trip to Peru, so far the only trip in South America. But again, we somehow saw on either Facebook or website somewhere that there was a call for people having pictures from South America. So I entered the game, I don't know, maybe one, maybe two, and they showed up there.
Wow.
You enter and it shows.
Yeah,
It's like magic.
exactly.
Put yourself out there.
In magical ways. Like we're here on doing this interview.
That makes me happy. And Luiza, I'm interested in what you said about starting your art during COVID, because I think people started all kinds of things at that time. We heard a lot about people making bread. We didn't hear quite so much about people becoming visual artists. We had Dave Pearson on earlier in the show, and he was telling me how there was a rush on acoustic guitars and that the prices of instruments went up. We know that the price of puppies went way up. Mm-hmm. So it really was a challenging time for the community, but it was also a special time when people had more time and also less distractions than they normally do. We hope not to repeat a pandemic again. But if there is somebody out there who has always wanted to try art, but they haven't quite found the time for it, or maybe they're even a little afraid because they're not sure if they'll be very good, what could you share with them about your experience of going for it and seeing what happens?
So I would just advise them to set a place at your home, get all your equipment, get all the paintbrushes and paint, and just see what happens. Just, I don't know how some people maybe like to paint on the wall, some people on the floor. And I feel that if you have something that your heart wants to express, you're gonna somehow do it because it wants to come out. So if somebody's dreaming of painting, it's already in them. Yeah.
Yeah. And what about photography? Is that something that you came to later in life, or is it something that you've always been interested in?
I've been always interested in it. Elementary school, that's when I started. So most of my life I've been with photography. It was one of those things that I was photographer, amateur photographer, and then I dropped it, and I came back to it, dropped it, came back to it, and now I'm sticking with it. I'm not dropping it at all, ever, unless I go blind, or hopefully not anytime soon. So I started with photography because of my dad. Part of his job involved taking pictures, so every now and then he would develop the pictures at home, right? So I was always helping him. Then I got my own camera, so I didn't have to use his, which I still have. And that's how I started. It was with my dad, taking pictures and developing them in makeshift darkroom.
What kind of pictures did your dad like to take? Was it also landscapes or wildlife? Or
So for him, I think it was mostly architecture. That was partly because of his job. He had to take some of those pictures of buildings, of old buildings. And then I guess he really liked taking pictures, I guess, of the family and I guess some nature, but not so much nature. No. Nature is something that I drifted from his influences.
And Luiza, is there anyone in your family who paints or is a visual artist that you know of?
No, not really. That's why I feel that it took me so long to do it myself, because it was more, I'll go to school, get an education, and somehow the art wasn't kind of pushed to pursue it. Yeah. So I had to do it for myself. Yeah.
You guys have been in Canada for a long time, and you've been in London for quite some time as well. How have you found emerging into the local art scene, especially as somebody, Luiza, who's kind of newly identifying as an artist?
I find that there's so many artists and community groups, and artists are so kind of engaging and inviting that once you want to do it and talk about it, there's a lot of people out there. Like with Simple Reflections, there's so many visual artists. So there's lots of them out there. Yeah. And there's the
London's community artist, the
Doors Open.
Oh, the Doors.
The Doors Open. Yeah.
And the London Studio Artist Tour?
London Studio Artist Tour. Yeah.
London Artist Studio Tour.
Yes. Yeah. Which is amazing, right? I mean, like it's behind the scenes how artists create. That's beautiful.
We've had a few of the artists that are a part of that tour here. Sayaro. We also had Kay here with us, and Catherine Eichstad was here as well. And I agree with you that being able to go into homes of artists and studios of artists and be able to talk to them is such a powerful thing, because you may just love what you see on the wall, but it's a whole nother thing being able to talk to them about how they create and why they choose the themes that they do. And that's why we wanted to have this show as well, because what my hope is that people will see this, and when they see you out in the community, when they see you at a place like TAP, or I know I always run into you at Covent Garden Market. You guys are big fans of tea and coffee. And also cooking classes, and you're really active. I see you at Museum London and different places, and that familiarity of knowing that you really love what somebody puts out from their artistic expression, but also an ability to connect with that person just as people. And that's something that I love about London. There just are so many great people here, and you two are some of my, really, honestly, some of my favorite people that I've met here.
Thank you.
So I'm very glad you made the time to be here with me today. And if anybody would like to find out more about you, if they would like to see more examples of your work, or they'd like to purchase a piece of yours, they can find you on Instagram. And I really hope that people take the time to do that, and just that they say hi, because you guys are lovely people, lovely couple, and you're very friendly. And I know you'll welcome any Londoner with open arms, and you're always happy to make new friends.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
In London, I fell in love.